Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second SSP webinar of 2019. You are joining us for a discussion titled We Can But Should Be, Launching a New Product or Service or Not. I'm Jeff Lang with the American Chemical Society, the chair of the SSP Webinars Working Group, and we're pleased that you could join us today. In a moment, we'll get started and hear from our moderator and panelists. You'll be seeing the splash screen here as we start the discussion and through the discussion today. Your phone will be muted automatically in consideration of our presenters and your fellow webinar participants. Please use the questions feature on the panel of your screen to send in your questions, or if you need to let us know that you're having a technical difficulty. The moderator will review the questions and present them to the panelists. To help her, please specify to which presenter you'd like your question directed. Also, please send in your questions as we go. They'll be addressed after the initial questions have been asked. At the conclusion of today's session, you'll receive a webinar evaluation via email. We encourage you to provide feedback so we can continually improve the SSP webinar program. You will also receive a link via email to the recorded broadcast of this webinar and to the slides, if there were any. Our moderator today is Sylvia Hunter, currently Marketing Manager at Anera, which specializes in intelligent automation for publishers, including Xtiles and EdFix software. Before joining Anera, she worked for over 20 years in university press publishing, where she was involved primarily in journals editorial and production, XML conversion and QA, and ebook production. Now I'll turn the webinar over to Sylvia so that she can introduce the panel and get us started.
Hi, everyone. So our panelists today are Neil Blair Christensen, Daniel Griffin, and Tammy Hanna, and I'm going to introduce them in order. Neil is head of sales in the Americas for Unsilo, which is an AI startup that focuses on the publishing industry. Before joining Unsilo, his experiences included publishing roles in Europe, Asia Pacific, and the US with Monksguard, Blackwell, Nature Publishing Group, Wiley, and University of California Press. He's worked in production, editorial, product and business development, from journals to clinical solutions, and across the humanities, social sciences, health, and life sciences. New product and service development have been core objectives of all his senior roles, and he's also been involved in consumer startups outside of publishing. Daniel Griffin is the first web presence manager for Duke University Press, where for the past 3 years, he's been responsible for developing and delivering the strategic roadmap for the press's web portfolio, including its marketing, e-commerce, and scholarly publishing platforms. Dr. Tammy Hanna is an assistant director and publisher in the American Chemical Society's Publications Division. Tammy's responsibilities include managing a team of publishing professionals in the US and China, the strategic development of a portfolio of 24 journals, including the flagship ACS journal, new journal development, and journal acquisitions. Tammy was instrumental in developing ACS Reviewer Lab, which is a free online tutorial for researchers who want to hone their peer review skills. She also serves as the co-chair of the Council of Science Editors Membership Committee. So, welcome to our webinar. We're just going to start right in on our questions. So to start with, I'm going to start with Neil. Neil, when you come up with what you think is a great new idea for a product or service, what's your process for evaluating whether or not to jump in?
I think a lot of things go on. I think to me, the process for evaluating an idea, it often tends to start with some sort of obsession over a problem or an opportunity. You know, we have some data, we have some insight, some curiosity, something we just can't shake. And it may be that it's a naive approach. It always turns out to be somewhat naive in retrospect. But there's also at the same time some conscious sort of reality distortion where we allow ourselves to be a bit naive about something, because that's beneficial when we sort of give birth to ideas, and we just acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. But the idea of launching something is sort of that hunt for answers, and then from that point, it's a gradual process, right, where we have some different tools and frameworks that we can use to assemble enough confidence in an idea. So I like to use the business model canvas or the value proposition canvas if people are familiar with those. If not, I definitely recommend checking them out. And then we just try and build confidence in sort of the idea, sort of the truths or our assumptions around the problems or opportunities we're trying to solve, right? And the business we try to generate. So I think a lot of this is really when we sort of try and filter out what turns out to be a good or a bad idea. It's often around a good idea tends to have some qualities where it's able to absorb all the complexities that we start to uncover. And the weaker ideas, the ideas that tend to die, tend to be the ones that can't really accommodate these realities or complexities that we uncover, and it just starts withering away because we find out it doesn't work, right? But of course, part of this initial framing is the standard stuff. Who's it for? How does it fit our business? Market sizing, business model, and all the sort of technology and people requirements. All this standard stuff we build in.
Thanks, Neil. Daniel, do you want to take this one?
Sure thing. So, of course, there are a couple different paths to how we attack this, depending on the type of product and service that we're looking at. So, of course, we have a strategic plan here at the press. We do these every 5 years or so, and there's a great deal of planning that goes into that, and those are really our strong organizational goals and are very large in scale. So those are those can be require a lot of information to put together, and really where we're looking to go as a press as a whole. But then we also have a bottom-up project proposal process, and under this model, unit leaders are going to be ones submitting project proposals, and those project proposals are going to assemble basically all the information that we need to make a decision on them. That's the business case, what resources are necessary, and depending on the project, it could be more or less information. But really what's important is understanding the business need that this product or service is going to meet, and really weighing that against all other factors. So we then evaluate these projects on a quarterly basis. These get weighed against the project's need and the time it takes, the resources required, and how well it fits in with our mission, which is very, very important. When I'm thinking about developing my roadmap, I'm thinking both about what's going to ease pain points, but also what's going to be something that's going to enhance our services and either be something really good for the customer or really something that's going to make everything easier for us. So it's a tricky balance, and project by project requires a different set of information.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, Tammy, over to you.
Thanks. So in addition to what Neil and Daniel have already mentioned, I think when you come up with a new idea, it's really important to chat with your coworkers to see if the idea has already been discussed or any progress has been made within your organization. Sometimes you have a great idea, but you aren't aware of the institutional knowledge that other people might possess. So kind of getting a handle on that is important. I also think it's important to see if the product or service that you're pitching already exists with competitors. And if it does, how successful it has been with those competitors, and if it fits your market, because your competitors might be marketing to a different group of customers. I like to pull a little bit of data to see if the idea has merit with the customers that ACS represents. And then, as Daniel and Neil have mentioned, consider the level of effort, the cost, and the expected outcomes, kind of a back of the envelope calculation. I think it's safe to say that everyone wants to work on a new project. It's sometimes much more exciting than your existing work. So don't let that overrun all of the other things you have to do when you have a new idea. And if the project decides to move forward because there's support from other people in the organization, think about how it can be broken into smaller pieces so different stakeholders can be assigned a share of the accountability. So learning how to get information about your new product and delegate to the people who can provide you with the information you're looking for is really important.
Thanks, that's great. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, Tammy, we're going to start with you this time, to think about a product or service that you launched that's been successful and tell us what you think were the factors that helped it succeed.
I think that the first thing that will help a project succeed is a clear need in the market, and then support from your customer base. You have to have some internal know-how or access to a vendor that can help you get your product up and running efficiently. And it really helps to have either a subject matter expert in-house or a staff member that's really enthusiastic about the project and can drive it forward. If you're not excited about a project, then it's really hard to inspire and persuade other people to be interested. So I'm going to talk about a project that ACS has found to be really successful, and that's ACS Reviewer Lab. And the reason that I think this product was so successful is that there were no other products like it in the market. And we really did our research and found out that our audience, which is authors and researchers in chemistry labs, were clamoring for training and didn't receive that in the course of their formal education. So there were a number of surveys that other publishers undertook and some of our own feedback from author surveys that we send out that said there's a real need for reviewer training modules. We wanted to make sure that we respected our audience and met them where they were, so we made sure that the course we created is self-paced. It can be completed in any order, and there are different exercises throughout that test our users' knowledge and understanding. And we added a final assessment that let us know that the person who had taken the course really understood the content and was ready to serve as a reviewer for ACS. We were clear on the first page of our ACS Reviewer Lab homepage that what users would get out of the program. And we also offered them multiple formats for training, like audio and video and text. And we translated portions of the course content into Chinese and Japanese, which was the core audience that we were seeking. At the end of each module, we offer a downloadable one-page cheat sheet so that users have something that they can refer back to later and don't have to log back into the ACS Reviewer Lab system. We were really careful to think about what terminology we used throughout the course, and we defined words that we thought people might be unfamiliar with. So we kind of started so that everyone was at the same basic level of information. The last thing we did to make sure that the product was really useful is that we waited to ask for additional metadata that we didn't need until after people completed the course. So someone who just logged in to see what was going on didn't have to provide us with all of their background information and expertise. And we really only wanted that of someone who went all the way through the course and showed some value. I think another thing that helped this product be successful is that we provide it free of charge to anyone who has an ACS ID, and that's also free to get. So it's a clear service to the community, but we also knew what value that we were hoping ACS would get out of this product and what we were hoping to give to our users as a resource for them. And one of the really cool unexpected successes of the Reviewer Lab program is that 12% of the users are outside of chemistry and traditional related sciences. So we feel like we really had a product that was needed and met the niche that we were hoping to fill.
So I do hear we've got a little quiet time here, and we were prepared for the case that Sylvia might drop off. She was having some technical difficulties. This is Jeff jumping in, and I was
It's okay, I'm back.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, all yours, Sylvia.
I'm back. Sorry, it did drop out for a bit. Okay, so I'm going to say thank you to Tammy for that answer and move on to Neil, please.
Yeah. So let me think here. The question about what product or service?
The question is about a specific product or service you launched that was successful and what you think helped it succeed.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it had to do with timing. Of course, there are the usual things, right? Customer adoption, stakeholder support, or so. But a lot of it had to do with timing and having. You know, a good understanding of the assumptions we were making going into it, not necessarily knowing exactly how everything was going to play out, but having gone through all the different assumptions that you think about before launching a product, right? Understanding the problem you're trying to solve, having some validation of that problem with your future customers. understanding where it's going to sit in the market, how the market is sized, how it fits the business, the resources needed, all those things, and having everyone sort of agreed internally on how this could play out. So I have one particular example is a journal that I was part of launching, and I think some of the success criteria for that journal was that it was basically just addressing an entrenched market, right? Where there were some players in that space already that were probably more focused on solving their own problems than the problems of the customers, and those entrenched players were mistaking their own sort of leadership with customer loyalty. We managed to employ the brand of a society that's sort of been sitting off to the side, and then corralling people to that new idea. Actually, I can't mention the name of this particular customer for various reasons. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question much more than that. I probably have more examples on things that failed, but I can say that in terms of what we define as success, I find that there's something interesting there. Sometimes there's success in failure, and I know this can sound a bit like a cliche, but I've been part of a project sometimes where we could look at it and say, oh, this failed, but then there were parts of that project that actually could be defined as a success, and maybe I'll come back to that once we get to the fail examples.
Yes, I think that would be great, Neil. Daniel, can you opine on this one?
Sure. I think that Neil and Tammy had some great points there. I wanted to talk about a service that I was convinced was not going to work, but ended up being successful, and sort of what I learned from that, because that's always good to interrogate our own biases. So we had a service that provided free content to users in exchange for some marketing information, and it's a relatively successful program, but it was definitely costing us a lot of money, and we weren't really recouping a ton of that, at least as we could tie it to outcomes. And the desire came up from a marketing team. Why don't we rethink how we're doing this service, and let's instead of giving away products for free, let's have a nominal charge for access to the same products. And I said to myself, there's no way that people are going to want to pay for access that they're getting for free now. That's going to just totally cannibalize the service and so forth. But they said no, we're pretty sure that it's still going to be really popular, and just even on sort of our low estimates, we'll make up the cost of developing it with this nominal fee that we're going to charge. And what we're really going to do is focus on the customer experience during this process. The whole process is very laborious and labor intensive, because we wanted to make sure we got a ton of stuff from our customers as they were getting free content. And they said, no, we're gonna retool the whole thing, and it's gonna be super easy for the customer, and they're gonna love it. So they did their research, and they kind of had an idea of how much they were expecting to get out of this, and so said, okay, well, it looks like this is something that's going forward, and we got support from our management team to implement it. And so we implemented it, and it turned out to be pretty wildly successful, and we're certainly making up the everything we pretty quickly. Within a year, I think we had made up the development costs in that, probably 6 months. And it turns out that the focus on improving our customer experience was just the best thing we can do. It ended up being much easier than competing services, and really makes the lesson, for me anyways, that by listening to our customers and telling them where they're having their pain points, and getting rid of them can really make up for make a lot of gains for us.
That's great. Okay, so our next question is, as you may have guessed, about failures rather than successes. I'm going to start with you this time, Daniel, and I'm going to ask you to think about a product or a service that you launched that wasn't successful, and tell us what lessons you learned from that experience, and how would you put those lessons into practice in a new launch, or how have you put those lessons into practice in subsequent products or service launches?
Sure thing. So a couple of years ago, we did a test run on an author service that aimed to, increase our post-publication engagement with our publications, and we did a bit of research in looking at this. We looked at a couple competing services. We usually do that when we're looking at solving some business need, and we looked at some case studies and looked at some general metrics that the service had put forward, and it looked pretty good from the outset, and all indications pointed to this is going to be successful. And so we launched it as a trial run, and we said we're gonna run this for a year, see how it goes, and see what the uptake is. And so we did that. We put some work into marketing the service, some website information pages, social media, the email campaign, those sorts of things. And what we found after a year of looking at the metrics, we found it just wasn't popular with our authors. It wasn't giving us the engagement we were going to see. So we kind of dug into that a little bit, and we learned that sort of our authors weren't really interested in the service. We're mostly humanities and social science publisher, and it just wasn't something that was known in those fields. So it was not something that if one of our authors were to go to their colleagues and say, hey, have you heard about this? It's very likely they would not have heard about it. So in our particular vertical, it wasn't, it just wasn't known. So it was a little too early to market there. And the goal it was trying to solve, we kind of realized was a much lower priority for many of our authors. So they weren't interested in putting in the work, even though it wasn't too much, but weren't interested in putting in work on their part to make it a success. So luckily we did it as a trial run, and we were able to kind of pull out early. But one of the things that I certainly take out of this, and I think my colleagues do too, is that our vertical is not necessarily going to react the same way as other areas in scholarly publishing. So we're much more interested now in looking at case studies or data that's going to have some relevance for our particular vertical, making sure that we're not trying to replicate the success that a company with different clientele had.
Okay, thanks. Tammy, how about you?
Well, first I want to say that sometimes it's hard to know when you've had a successful product, because one part of the organization may consider something to be successful where another part of the organization considers it an abject failure. And it could be that, your product wasn't successful fast enough, and so people decide you need to pull out. But the product that I'm going to be talking about today was really a product where I think at the end we needed more market research. We had thought that we were solving an author pain point, and the market research that we had done showed that our authors would be interested in the product and would find it valuable. But what we found after we launched our product was that we were later to market than other competitors, and there were already established workflows and processes in place that our authors were familiar with. So asking them to migrate to our product from a product that they were already using and they understood how to use was kind of a big ask, and it took a lot more effort than we had expected. And there was a lot more discontent when we asked our authors to do that migration. And while we saw that, we thought, well, we've put a lot of resources into this product, so we're going to continue to encourage its use. And I think we put that product into a different part of our workflow that would require authors to go through an extra step to use it. And I think that led to a little bit more ire. And so at the end, we decided that even though we put in a sufficient amount of resources, we really just misjudged the need and interest of our community for this product. And we have since pulled out of our interest in that product. What that did tell us, though, was for future projects, we should have done more extensive beta testing in the markets where we wanted to engage and tried out new features to see what was feasible, what authors really were looking for, and setting ourselves with appropriate checkpoints. So things like, what is the least that we can launch with to feel comfortable? What features do we think are great, but we could live without in a future launch? And then we also learned that it was really important to get more stakeholders from across our division involved earlier, so that if we were going in the wrong path, we had more people giving us critical commentary earlier on, and made us more aware of any potential challenges that we were facing. And so we've since really worked through a process that we can use a project management team to help us tracking and prioritizing projects and setting up ideation, discovery, and initiation for these projects. But it seemed like a really great product, and we just really missed the mark.
Thanks, Tammy. Neil, I feel like you said you had some things to talk about for this question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so and maybe it seconds quite well on what Daniel and Tammy were talking about. Maybe in particular, Tammy's experience here of, sometimes you have something where, all depending on sort of the point of view, someone in an organization will say, well, this was a success in some ways, and others may say it wasn't a success, and maybe in particular once you sort of inspect it against the original budget. But this was a project with a university press where we decided to launch a mega journal, right? So this was at University of California Press, very recognizable brand, you could say, if you just say University of California. And we decided that we'd want to mimic sort of the dynamics of the marketplace at a time of a mega journal. And maybe we were slightly late to the party, sort of similar to what Sam has said, so maybe there was a timing issue to begin with. But we did a ton of research, right? I mean, going back to sort of what I was mentioning initially on doing sort of your business modeling canvas and your value proposition canvas, right? And I can't even start to remember how many business models we ran for this, right? And long risk mitigation strategies. We brought in a PR company to help with sort of the planning and the execution of the launch. We did a ton of conversations, right? I mean, I think just in the initial market research, we probably did like over 100 one-on-one interviews in addition to group calls, right, with academics and with librarians and with funders. We did some very interesting things with that product, right? We instituted a paid forward model where reviewers get part of the APC, and then they're allowed to decide whether they want to cash out on that or whether they want to pay it forward back to the journal to help future authors, or allocated it back to their libraries to help their libraries pay for whatever the library wants to pay for. We also instituted an open reviewer model, right, where reviewers and authors get to determine whether the reviewer reports are made available and whether the identities of the reviewers are disclosed. So some really interesting stuff. And then we partnered our way into it, right? As a smaller organization, I mean, there's always some limitations to what you can achieve, right? And the difficult pieces here, sort of the management of payments and the platform piece. We partnered with a couple of startups, including Ubiquity Press, to sort of have a fairly easy, affordable, and painless launch. So going into it, we're thinking we're doing everything right, and we launched, and we had enormous press. I mean, I don't know. I'd only been at the press for a year and a half or so at the time of the launch, but I would almost say that the press was probably more than UC Press had received in years. I mean, we had to turn down interviews, we had to turn down presentation opportunities because there were just too many. It was all super exciting, right? And we got some initial submissions, and it just looked really good. And then things started going. They didn't go south, but they didn't really grow as we had expected. Right. For one, we had a number of launch domains that we had meticulously planned. This is why we launch in this domain and not in that domain, and this is how we stage them. So we don't just do one megajoule at the beginning. We sort of taper it in phases. And our launch domain just didn't respond. To our surprise, there was another domain that responded, the psychology community, that took a liking. And why was that? It's difficult to say. Was it because one of our very early papers was a very, very good psychology study? Was it because the publisher on the product had a background in managing a psychology list and had been able to secure some particularly strong editors in psychology? Was it because psychology just took a liking to this type of model, and there was a sub-community within there that didn't feel that there was a journal out there that matched their needs and their pains? It's really difficult to say. But in the end, of course, the challenge, the beauty was, yes, there was a community that sort of started adopting this. The challenge was that we were not seeing growth anywhere near what we had expected, right? And we have to keep in mind that the things that we had expected, we had been putting together those numbers 12, 18 months in advance, almost in parallel to doing the market research, right? And then we would put forward one set of numbers, and they would be deemed, that's not quite attractive enough, right? And then we fell into this trap, maybe not a trap, but this rabbit hole of doing numbers so they look good enough. Now everyone feels happy about the numbers that we're presenting. Now we can get the go ahead, we can get the sign off. That was one trap, right? The other challenge after we launched, and we sort of realized that it wasn't quite performing the way we had initially hoped, was sort of the budget, right? You get a bag of money to do something, you have your runway in that to achieve some sort of confidence in that you're on the right track. Months in advance, you would have split that budget into, this is how much we're going to spend on this is how much we're going to spend on that. And I think we also made some mistakes there of sticking to that budget, right? So to say, well, we plan to launch into these domains, so we're going to continue, and we're going to continue to pump marketing money into, author outreach in this domain, even when we saw that there was no traction, right? Well, why isn't it getting traction? Well, because we're not really committing. Let's spend the money that was set aside, and it didn't really work. So I think it's almost like it's a specific one, right? But I think it's probably a type of failure that many of us will recognize. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are now moving on to our next question, and I'm going to ask Tammy to start on this one. This is a little bit more of a maybe metaphysical, maybe practical question. How do you measure success versus failure, and at what point do you cut your losses and move on?
That's a really hard question. Cutting your losses and moving on is a really tough decision to make. I think it starts with setting realistic and achievable metrics at the start of a project before you've done any work. So you can say, if we don't get to this point by this set of time, this is when we would consider the project to be a failure. And I think about the cone of uncertainty, the worst possible outcome to the best possible outcome, and how the team would feel if, you know, the worst possible outcome came to pass, and if it was worth the effort, and if it indicated that there was enough market interest to continue with the product that you've started. It's very possible that the product has slow uptake at the beginning, but there is some indication that there is increasing interest. And so you have to decide, how long can we wait before someone like senior management decides to pull the plug? Is there enough increasing interest that you can kind of show a steady slope? Or was there initial interest that's really fallen off and you've done nothing that you can do to market your product will increase that interest? It's also a great idea to do some beta testing early on. You've launched your product. How is the feedback that you're getting? Neil talked about getting a lot of publicity. Not all products start with as much publicity as the product that he was describing. So you want to kind of understand within your marketplace, how is the product being received? I think it's really important as you organize the team that's going to help launch a product that you make it very clear that success and failure are everyone's responsibility. You don't want to have a single scapegoat if something goes wrong with a project. And I've definitely seen that happen where the product isn't as valued by your customer base as you hope. And so people start to point fingers, and that can be a real problem. But at the end, I think you have to decide how much tolerance there is for failure. Some projects receive a lot of resources and buzz, so it's really embarrassing when those projects don't work out. I like to think about the dark horse projects where there's not very much expected from them, but when they do super well, there's a lot of excitement that's generated internally, and it feels like a huge win, even when it's a small change in excitement level. And I think if you can be part of a project that's stalled and looks like it's unfixable, and then you jump in and make some changes and turn it into something more, that is a really great thing to do. But back to your question about how do you really know when to cut your losses, there has to be a point where your organization says it's not worth any more investment in this product. We have to let it loose. And probably there are going to be a number of people weighing in on that decision, and it's not going to come down to the whim of just one person.
Let's hope. Okay. Neil, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tammy. It's a difficult one. I don't think it's very difficult to sort of establish the golden rule for when you cut your losses and move on, or how we say this was definitely a success, this was definitely a failure. But I think a lot of it has to do with assessing or estimating gain, right? When we reach a point where we estimate that we'll gain more by stopping a project than we'll gain by continuing the project, that's when we need to think about cutting our losses. Right? Why are we doing it? And I think there's a lot of I think there's books that have been written about this stuff, like psychology, about, you know, when we focus on what we gain from stopping a project, we tend to be slightly more, maybe it varies a bit, but slightly more likely to sort of accept mistakes, problems, you know, issues for whatever they are, and say, you know, let's just make the right decision. On the other hand, when we focus on what we lose from stopping a project, and that tends to very quickly become a discussion about, you know, sunk costs, right? But we spent all this, you know, let's we need to just, you know, go
stay the course.
Exactly, right. You know, we're going to lose everything if we don't just give it another month, right, or another 6 months, or you know, when we start doing that, then we start to make the wrong decisions, right? It becomes a very defensive play, and it becomes about just trying to recoup what we've already thrown into this, rather than let's continue this, because this is, think about the things we're going to gain when we pull this off, and let's focus on how do we make those gains. I think those are some things to think about when you're trying to determine whether to move on or not. But I would say there is no golden rule, right? And I feel the greatest X factor in all this stuff is us, right? I mean, humans, we're so different, right? I've worked at lots of different organizations and seen so many different conclusions reached about similar problems. And all of these organizations, incredibly smart people, right? But you have different people in the room, you have different leadership, you have different circumstances, you have a different product, you have a different sunk cost, you have a different gain. All this stuff creates like just this gray zone of exceptions, right? And estimates and risk taking that lead to different decisions. And I think you just have to accept that there isn't like a recipe you can just follow and say, well, this is how it works universally. I have one, and I don't know, maybe it's just a popular example, but it's one of my favorite examples, even though it may be a bit of a fairy tale. But quickly, a guy called Phil Libin, right, CEO of Evernote, if you know that, the note-taking tool, and they were running out of money, and I think he was up late one night, sleepless, because he had to go into the office next day and prepare to start letting people go because there was just no more runway. And he received one of these emails from one of these evangelist users who was just raving about the product, and in his mind he was thinking, that's great, but honestly, I need people to start spending money on my product rather than just telling me how great it is, right? And then the person said, if there's ever anything I can do, just let me know. And then I guess Phil somehow managed to communicate, well, actually, we need some money. And at the end of that communication that night, right, he had secured something like, I don't know, like $500,000, enough to not go in and start the process of laying off people, right? And buying the additional runway that then, let Evernote go out and raise tens of millions of dollars. I can't speak to how Evernote is doing today, but at least, it was an example of an idea that could have died simply because it ran out of runway. And we would never have known, was it really a success? Was it a failure? Many people would just have written it off as a failure. So I think when we sort of think of failure and success, you have to be sort of very cognizant that a lot of it just has to do with timing and circumstance. An idea can be perfectly good, but it's not the right time. On the other hand, you can have organizations that spend years chasing after a lousy idea, but because it has the right stakeholder buy-in, right? It's the pet idea of someone in the executive leadership.
Okay, that's a lot to think about. So Daniel, I'm going to ask you to wrap up this question, and then we're going to move on to some audience questions.
Sure thing. Yeah, Tammy, Neil, great answers. And I'm going to echo a lot of it. Certainly making sure you have the appropriate time and making sure you are collecting that data. I mean, the warning that I hear all the time about AI is that, it's a great marketing gimmick, but unless you've got hard drives and hard drives of data to plug into it, it might not actually give you the results you want. So making sure you collect all that data is very important. They're thinking about success and failure. I really want to try to pitch everything as a trial run at the start and take that out of the sort of discretionary budget if possible. And then at the end of the trial run, put that into the budget, because that's going to be, if we're doing something like a zero-based budgeting, putting in that budget line is going to be one of the great deciders there. Are people really interested enough to put their money there? So that's a good point. But I think that as Neil said, people are humans, and if people aren't excited about a project anymore, if it doesn't give them, if you were to go to someone and say, does working on this project make this a better place to work or a worse place to work? You're going to get that answer pretty quick. And if you got people saying, oh man, this is horrible, then that might be the time to walk away.
That's a good point too. Okay, so our first question from the audience is, again, pretty broad, I think. Have you ever felt like you pulled the plug on a project too soon? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
Yes, I mean, I'd be happy to jump in. I think all the time, and we will forever never know. You know, it's just so difficult. I think you just have to accept that you make decisions with the information that is available to you at the time, both when you decide to launch or sort of get on with the product, and also when you decide to pull a plug. But to me, it's really back to that gain thing, right? We make the decision because we were like, you know what, this is where we need to be next year or 3 years from now, and looking at what we see, do we believe we are gonna get there, right? Are we gonna gain from this? And if you're not sure, you just make a decision and you live with it. And I actually feel that some of the benefits of doing that is that the minute you do make that decision and you do decide to pull the plug, there's almost like a relief, right? And a relief sometimes in the organization, which is often when you know it was the right decision, right? Yeah, maybe we could have carried on and maybe it would have been a good thing. But when people sort of like, thank goodness, right? Then maybe it wasn't that bad an idea to pull the plug for the entirety of the organization. It gives the organization other things to focus on, or the ability to focus on other things.
And I want to point out that when we talk about the gains from pulling the plug on one project, we're not just talking about money saved. We're also talking about a gain in time that you can devote to something else, right?
Absolutely. I think an organization can do a lot of things, and maybe to some extent it can only do so many things, right? And trying to launch a new product. When we launch new products, right, there's always like a ton of complexity. And I think I started out by saying, we always sort of approach it with a fairly naive approach initially, right? And then as the idea grows, right, we manage to push more complexity into it. And the most beautiful projects or products or services are the ones where it's a really simple value proposition, but there's a ton of complexity underneath. Or, we've managed to sort of provide something that's simple but has a lot of complexity. That complexity is what the organization deals with, right?
Yes.
And when a project isn't quite working out the way we want it to, it's almost like there's an exponential growth of that complexity, right? Because that just means that we're not getting the answers we need to make clear-cut decisions about the evolution of the product, and that can really hurt an organization and morale. In addition to money and all that kind of stuff. It's really an ineffective use of this collection of brains that you've hired to try and achieve something.
Yeah. So Daniel or Tammy, do either of you want to take a crack at that question?
I'm going to jump in and say that rather than pulling the plug too soon, I often think about the projects that never got off the ground because they weren't supported internally by the right people. And I sometimes look back at those products and think, what if we had launched that product 2 years ago when it first came up, and now a competitor has gained market share where we could have been? Or what if we had pitched that product in a different way, and that had led to this great journal that would have really caught on with our community. I think if you have a really good product idea that didn't get off the ground, to bring it up a couple years later, because sometimes, as we've discussed a number of times today, the timing just isn't right. And a product that you pitched 2 years ago really didn't make sense for the organization and the priorities that they'd set. But 2 years later, there's really a need for it, either in your market or it meets the strategic goals that your company is now aiming for. And so sometimes a project gets a second chance because it has a really good person fighting for it. And I know this happens within our organization. We even had a product come to pass about 30 years after it had originally been proposed, because it just didn't make sense 30 years before, but there was that institutional knowledge. Oh, hey, do you remember 30 years ago someone pitched this? And so I would say if you're the person generating a really great idea that hasn't caught on yet, not to give up hope, because sometimes those products come back and really add a lot of value later on. So I didn't answer the question that you asked, but
that's a really good set of ideas to think about. Daniel, do you want to speak to this one too?
I think that they hit the nail on the head there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we have another question, and that is, what advice would you give to someone, you personally, who is trying to get momentum going on a new project that others around you don't seem enthusiastic about? And I think to that, I would add, do you? Should you do that? Or should you take that as a sign? Like, what does everyone think?
Well, I'd be happy to, if you're really excited in a project and you really want to get it off the ground, you got to be the biggest cheerleader for it, and you really have to, take each stakeholder who's going to make that decision seriously, and try to understand what's going to convince them to come around to your line of thinking. It's going to be a tailored approach. It's going to be slow, but it's sometimes the timing picks it up. I know there was a project not too long ago that nobody wanted to talk about really taking up, and then some change in legislation happened, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we really got to take this seriously. And so we were, because I was sort of banging the drum on it and being very proactive, it got off the ground pretty quick.
Yeah.
I would say that you really want to think about why other people aren't enthusiastic. Is it possible that the project that you're really excited about isn't a priority for another team because they have something that they have to get done to meet some other metric or goal that their team, you aren't aware of, but they have to do, and that maybe if you put your enthusiasm forward and say, but this could be something that we do 4 months from now, it'll fit into their schedule a little bit better. So really try to get into the shoes of the people who aren't supportive of the project and figure out what it is that they aren't supportive. Maybe they know something about the marketplace that you just aren't aware of. But I would also say that it's really important before you get the project started, is that you get a couple of champions at the top. So there could be some people that are senior colleagues to you that you can describe the project and why you're so excited and why you think this will help the business, and get them to go in and advocate for you. Sometimes having a few of those closed door meetings to get a couple people on your side really helps. And then when you get a larger project team together, you already have some built allies in the discussion who will say, that is a great project idea, so-and-so, could you actually support this if we make a few changes? So think about how you can use some people that you work closely with or some mentors to get on your side.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd agree. I think it is interesting just listening to you guys. It's almost like there's an inverse relationship there, right? But before, when you're trying to get your product accepted internally, right, the most difficult customers you have are your colleagues. Right? It's internal. And then once something launches, the most difficult customers you have are externally, right? And internally, maybe we're a bit blind to the realities. But before, right, you'll often have no problem finding lots of people say, oh yeah, I'll totally use that. I'll totally buy that if that existed, right? But then you launch and then they don't. So
that's the difference between asking people, surveying people for their express preferences and observing them to see what their real things are.
Exactly right. So to Tammy's point, I think so maybe the approach is really to think about this as the same way as you would when you are sort of testing your assumptions externally, right? Really trying to understand what it is you're trying to address for those people. What are their pain points? You could almost take a similar approach internally, right? really understand, well, what would it take for making this idea work? And also, I think acknowledging that when we have an idea, it's very, very rare, I think, maybe it's never happened, that an idea in its very immediate infancy is perfect as it is, right? Every idea, benefits from maturing. And the feedback you can get from colleagues can be part of that maturing, right? So don't get too caught up in the beauty of your own idea. I do that sometimes. I get caught up in the beauty of my own ideas, and colleagues should stop, right? And an idea will last a minute and it'll be gone.
Okay.
But I think there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah. We have very little time left, so I want to get to another couple of audience questions if we can. This is really, I think, a good one. How can you translate all of this to a small organization that doesn't have large teams or resources? What would you recommend a small organization should focus its resources on?
Should I go?
Yeah, can we hear from Daniel?
Yeah. So, the real critical thing is to have a really strongly defined vision from the top, and have a really strong mission statement. And so building out from your mission statement, what are we passionate about? What are our goals? And then from there, what are the business decisions we're going to make to achieve those goals? And you really got to focus on those first before anything else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tammy.
I completely second that. If you don't have a lot of resources, you have to say, what are the 1 to 3 ideas that we can achieve this year that we're going to be happy with, that are going to support what our business needs, and that are going to make us whatever revenues we need to bring in. And then you can't get sidetracked by the other 100 ideas that people bring forward. You really have to stick to your guns and say, as a team, we've collectively bought into these priorities, and anything else that looks great, we'll put on a list for future consideration.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Neil, do you have anything to add to this one? Because I have another one after this.
Yeah, just quickly, I think sometimes you'll benefit from sort of massaging the idea so it has like a really tight strategic fit with that organization, right? Because as a small organization, you're always going to have like limitations to how many different directions you can go in.
Right.
And so you really need a fit there, right? And once you have that, you will have a natural fit with the objectives of your colleagues, which means that they're more likely to back the idea. So it's really changing the idea to fit your organization.
Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. Are there any particular tools or methods used to gather and evaluate data before starting a product or project?
I would say the opposite, perhaps, that I tend to collect too much data and then get drowned in the data that I have, where there's just too many things to look at and too much analysis that I need to do to be able to make a decision, and I get paralyzed. So I would say collect the minimum amount of data you need to make the decision, and don't just get swamped in continuing to collect data that people ask for.
And in terms of like a specific, like what data collecting tools or methods do you find are most effective for getting those minimal data that you need?
I'll pitch in.
Sure.
I like to use, there are these two tools called the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas. And they are really just canvases. You look them up, Google them, you'll find them. There are some books, and it's just a methodology for you to establish the assumptions around a product or an idea, right? And it's evolving, right? You can, as you gather information, you can repaint, right? But it's almost like a checklist of here are the things I need to think about that are typically required in a strong idea or business plan. I would highly recommend you to check those out.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we need to wrap up. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to our panelists. And there will be a recording of this available soon.
And just to add in here, thank you to Sylvia. I'm so glad the technology and you held up throughout the presentation.
Yay!
Remember to respond to your webinar evaluations when you receive them over email. And please join us for the next webinar, which is the Scholarly Kitchen webinar entitled The Future of Content Distribution, Licensing versus Leakage. We'll see you on Wednesday, April 17th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.